Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. I'm Jonathan Crow, Director of Community here at NinjaOne. I have with me the man, the myth, the legend, Jeff Hunter, our field CTO, who is the face of Ninja in so many streams and webinars. Jeff is back. You can't get enough of him. We're going to keep doing these until you all tell us enough, Jeff. It hasn't happened yet.
You can't get enough of him. Sounds like a threat, Jonathan.
We'll see. I'll rely on you all in the chat to let me know. Thanks for joining us. So this is another NinjaOne like a ninja stream. And so we cover how to dive in and make full use of NinjaOne, right? We also cover some subjects outside of just using Ninja. Your job, of course, incorporates using lots of tools. It also, in some cases, incorporates you working with members outside of your own team. And so that's kind of what we're talking about here. Co-manage IT. If you're an MSP tuning in, this is the scenarios where you're actually working with internal IT members with your clients. And how are you setting up access so everyone gets access and permissions into what they do need, but not what they shouldn't have? How do you keep those things separate and working? How do you balance, as always, that line between security and accessibility? If you're an internal IT, and you're watching, how are you working with your MSP to figure out the same thing, right? And this is a question, Jeff, that I saw raised a lot, and pretty recently, but pretty evergreen too. We see folks that are in our Discord. Shout out to everybody from our Discord. We see them asking kind of routinely every now and then, hey, I'm trying to set this up. What's the best way to go about it? And so that's when I poked you, and you graciously offered some of your time to walk through some of that.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. As you said, there's kind of a variety of different situations to cover. There's one perspective as a managed service provider where you're focused maybe on working with an on-site IT coordinator. But then there's kind of the other perspective, which I have personal experience with, which is you're working in internal IT and maybe you have an outside vendor who needs some sort of limited access to a specific device under your control. In my experience, I had a couple different scenarios like that. But I know one was HVAC controls. We had our HVAC control system, and when we needed somebody to work on that, it was a situation of, do we want to wait and have somebody come out and pay extra money for an on-site visit, or do we want to set up something where we're able to have them remote in and take care of a problem remotely, which was not just faster, but cheaper. And so we'll kind of talk about all the various options you have at your disposal for letting non-system administrators into NinjaOne.
Yeah, and absolutely. Good that you called that real life use case out, Jeff. And whenever I hear HVAC, I think back to was it the Sony hack? What was it? It was like the HVAC vendor, the outside thing. So obviously, it's a point of these things need to happen. You need to be able to set these things up to where people can have access, but you have to do it securely. So always top of mind, right?
Yeah, and that's one thing we'll talk about is how we can set up permissions for maximal ease of use. We don't necessarily want to create 50 different permission sets where we can condense that down to 2 or 3 because it makes it a lot easier to update them at scale, so that, yeah, you don't end up in a situation where somebody has a permission and you go, oh, they shouldn't have that permission. I thought I disabled that months ago or years ago. So yeah, having that kind of visibility and trying to manage as much top down as possible is something we'll definitely talk about today.
Awesome. Cool. So thanks everybody for joining again. So if this is, primarily Jeff's going to be showing how to set these things up in NinjaOne. Obviously there's probably some takeaways too. We're going to be talking about role-based access and how to set things up from those principles, right? And so these are things that you can take away and probably utilize even if you're not using NinjaOne. But feel free, jump in the chat. Don't be shy. I know you guys never are, but ask us questions throughout. Don't wait until just the end. I'm happy to dig into everything. But with that, Jeff, what would you like to get into first?
I think let's go ahead and talk about the basic building blocks that you have the ability to utilize when you're talking about any kind of outside access. And so in NinjaOne, that really comes down to 2 different types of users. So if we go to administration and then accounts, we have our technicians, and everybody should be very familiar with the technician user type because you are probably all technicians. Anybody who's set up a Ninja account from scratch you are probably a system administrator in NinjaOne. And so that would be one type of user. And then the second type of user would be an end user. And so when we create an end user, they have a much more limited form of access into NinjaOne. And so that access looks a little something like this. And so this is extremely limited. It's all designed around a few basic specific functions that end users might want to use. And so, for example, submitting and managing tickets right here. You can grant them access to KB articles that you've uploaded through NinjaOne documentation. You have the ability to do self-service backup restorations with NinjaOne file and folder backup. Uh, but we see this used a lot for remote access. And so that could be terminal remote access here. More commonly, it's probably going to be NinjaOne remote access. And although I've only given myself access to one device here, you do have the ability to do multiple devices. So somebody could have 20, 30, 40 different devices, and they're all able to remotely access them through this portal. And the benefit of that is that they don't get access to the more powerful side of NinjaOne, which looks like this. This is the system administrator or the technician view. You get access to dashboards and all sorts of features and functionality that you might not want to expose to your garden variety end user. Now, of course, you can't have everybody be a system administrator inside of NinjaOne, so you do want to use the role-based permissions to limit what somebody is able to do inside of the platform. And so here you can see I have a whole bunch of different user roles or permission sets. And this is how I'm able to more centrally control what my technicians are able to do without having to go and set each of my permissions individually per technician, which is not ideal. It would be real bad to scale like that. Now, before we dive into the technician roles, I want to talk a little bit about how technicians and end users can be created. Now, obviously, you can create them manually inside of the GUI here. There is also a CSV import. So if you did want to import technicians from a CSV for bulk creation, that's another option as well. However, I do want to make sure everyone's aware of the IDP option. So if you're using something like Okta, Duo, if you're using what was formerly Azure Active Directory and what is now, I believe, Entra ID, you're able to integrate that into NinjaOne so that not just your technicians can get automatically created, but your end users can be created as well. And in the same way that technicians have roles, end users also are going to have roles. And you are able to assign those roles through your IDP. So you have a situation where you could have somebody automatically created as a technician and then automatically assign them the permission set that they need to have access to in order to do their job. You do need to create the permission set inside of NinjaOne first, but you actually can assign it inside of the IDP. Now, the one exception to that is you can't assign a system administrator role. So you would have to come in here and manually assign a system administrator role. You would not be able to assign that from the IDP. You would only be able to assign non-system administrator roles. And you can see here, we have our sysadmin role down here at the bottom. That's a default role that's inside of every Ninja environment. But all these other ones we have created. And so if we look here at our level 3 technicians, over on the left-hand side, you can see how we can control our various settings. Obviously, system settings are system-wide. These are big, important settings. And since we're looking at this from the perspective of co-managed IT, this is a menu where I'd say you probably do not want to allow access to most people who are on-site IT coordinators because there is the potential for them to do things that they may not really have the knowledge or the expertise in. And there's also the possibility of cross-pollination here between your client data if you're an MSP. So as a managed service provider, you might have a variety of clients in here, and you want to ensure that there's no accidental exposure of that data here. And so denying access to system actions in most cases, I think, is usually something most people want to do. And you can see here that controlling the ability to manage backup. Do you want them to be able to see it and not manage anything, or essentially just have it be invisible to them, like there's no access at all to backup whatsoever? Now, some options that you may want to grant access to, right here we can see Quick Connect. I see some chatter about that in the chat. We can talk about Quick Connect a little bit towards the end. But then something like background mode for NinjaOne Remote. Do you want to have them have the ability to do that silent system session into the device and not disrupt the end user? Should they be able to configure AV and EDR integrations? I'd say probably not in most cases. Tag creation. So all of your kind of more general settings, I'll say, in my opinion, I think you can really go ahead and turn this off entirely for most uh, co-managed IT situations. If you're a managed service provider, it's going to be pretty rare for you to want them to have access to the vast majority of line items that we see here. Now, other permissions, we have our MDM connections here. Again, for co-managed IT, you probably want to disable this from most people. Now, at this point, we start getting into what organizations is someone going to have access to. For starters, I don't think they should be able to create new organizations. Again, this is a co-managed IT situation. Why would they be able to create additional organizations? Now, another really important setting right below that is default access. What happens when you create new organizations? What is the default access that someone will be able to take advantage of? And in this case, I think no access is exactly what you want to have this setting set to. Now, down here, you can see we can explicitly allow access to a specific organization. And so right here, I can edit my permission and say, well, you have the ability to view this organization, but you don't have the ability to update any of the organization settings. And you definitely don't have the ability to delete anything. And this is key because if you delete an organization, all the devices inside that organization are also deleted. So I think it's really critical for really anybody who's not a system administrator. I really don't see any reason why they should be able to delete anything. My preference is to leave deleting solely in the hands of the system administrator. I'll admit that that's kind of up to everybody. Whatever you feel comfortable with is the setting that you should use. Then we come to devices. And so this is what we can do on devices. Can we see secure fields? What remote tools are we able to take advantage of? What remote access application are we able to take advantage of? Can we create new devices? Can we generate new installers? Again, this is a situation here where I feel like you probably should not be able to do that. And if you do allow them to do that, you would want to also modify another organization setting that essentially requires approval for incoming devices. I think as a managed service provider, you do generally want to keep track of what devices are being brought into your environments so that you can bill for them appropriately. If there's some sort of positive affirmation that needs to happen between your client and you in order to actually bill for those devices, I think it's a really good idea to go ahead and implement a setting inside of organizations to require device approval. And so here you can see the default behavior is you automatically can join to this organization. But if you move this down into manual, this means you get a little bit more granular control over when devices are attempting to join to this organization. So I'll say that my general recommendation is I don't think your on-site IT coordinator should be able to add new devices into NinjaOne, but if you do grant them that ability, I would recommend this as a secondary layer to make sure that you have the visibility of when these devices are being added into your division, because there's obviously licensing costs that are going to be associated with that. We also can set policy access here. I would generally say that you probably don't want to give policy access to most people. So this is another one that can be disabled. But I would say that if you do give them policy access, do not give them the ability to create new policies. And I would only give them view access. I would not allow them actually, I should say, I would give them no access in terms of the default access that we see here, and then I would explicitly give them view access to the policy that's relevant to them. You can see that in this environment, I have segmented my policies based off of organization. So Herrera Technologies, Bill's Maple Leaf Diner, law offices of J and James. I have distinct policies for each of my organizations. And because I have that one-to-one linear experience, it means it's really easy to say, hey, you don't get access to anything with the exception of Bill's Maple Leaf Diner here. We can go ahead and give you view access to that policy. So you're able to see the specific settings without the need to, or without giving them the ability to actually modify any of those settings. They can't change anything. We then move down into the automation library. This one is a tricky one. This is a really important one, I think, to get right. So first and foremost, can they create new categories? I will be honest here. This has been a bit of a bugbear for me for quite some time, but this is not accurate. We have this in the UI here, and it says that permissions for creating automations are specified per automation category. Not there. So what I would recommend is do not give anybody the ability to create new categories. That would give them the ability to create new scripts as well as new categories. And if you have the ability to create new categories, I think that basically breaks the permissions framework. I don't think that there's any I would not advise turning on the create new categories setting for anybody in a co-managed situation. I think that is currently an area where there's the potential for some exposure if somebody was to put sensitive information in scripts and in categories that would ultimately break the permissions framework. You can see here that if I set this to no access for default access, once I give myself the ability to create new categories, it automatically means that you can view, run, and update all categories, which is definitely not what you want to do. So for co-managed IT situations, if you're allowing them to run scripts at all, don't give them the ability to view or sorry, create categories right here. I feel very strongly about that. So in this case, do they also have the ability to create scheduled tasks right here? I'll leave that up to you. I think in most cases, I would say no. I would not want to give somebody the ability to create scheduled tasks in a co-managed situation. But again, I would defer to you on that. And then our default access here, you can see we would set this to none. And then by category, whatever category we wanted to authorize them for, we can edit our permissions and say, well, you can run this script, but you can't actually view it. So you're not seeing any code in case there is something sensitive inside of this script. But of course, you could give them the ability to view, run, and update. I would stop there. I do not think you want this option, view, run, and update, or view, run, and update and delete for your co-managed IT situations. I think view and run is probably about as far as I personally would feel comfortable going with granting co-managed access. Yeah, I see Chris here is making a good point that the approvals list is kind of hidden and hard to remember where to see them. Honestly, the easiest place is seeing that right here where you have your pending device approvals. That's going to be the easiest way to see. I do think that we have an activity for this that could remind you that there is a device that's registered. The only problem is I don't think we do this by organization. So yeah, device created right here. That would probably be what would give you some sort of ticket that would let you know that something requires approval. But to your point, Chris, I think I'm seeing that there's opportunity for improvement here.
Yeah, and Chris brings up this point too, and I'm just curious. Yeah, with everybody who's working with co-managed environments, whether you're an MSP or you're the internal IT department. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think Jeff's erring on the side of security here, and really wanting to lock things down, limit things, least privileged style stuff, which makes sense. And I just wonder if if this is like Chris is saying, if they've had other requests and things. I mean, I'm sure it depends a lot on how you're working with that internal IT team or vice versa, and what the differences of work is. But obviously, yeah, I mean, I think Jeff, you're rightly so stressing the anything that if someone, unless there's a concrete reason for someone to have access to something or their ability to do something, you should just disable it by default.
I think that you should basically have a positive reason why somebody needs to have access to that feature before you go further. Like why do they need this particular level of access? If you can't clear that bar, you start to say, what is my reasoning here? What's my rationale? Now, one thing I want to talk about here, because I see Dan and Chris have both brought this up. Chris says, I like to make a client company X category and give them access to create scripts under just that category. How do you do that? I think that's my problem, Chris, is how do you explicitly say you can only create scripts within that category? Because if you have the ability to create new categories here, you by default, and here, I'll show you again. If I set this all to no access here, like this, once I change this to allowed, view run update is default access for everything. So once you do that, everybody has access to everything, the way that I see it. So that's why I feel very strongly about not giving any co-manage situations allowed access here, is because it sets that default access to view, run, and update, which again, I'll say to me that just breaks permissions. Somebody could go in there and make a modification, and yeah, you're not going to want that. So yeah, that is, yeah, I would. I'm cautious of this. I think for some good reasons. And then same, I think Dan, I think your situation is the exact same reason. How do you give somebody the ability to only create scripts within their designated category? The way that I look at it, that permission doesn't exist in Ninja today. It's tied to this right here. Creating scripts and creating categories is unified in a way that I do not agree with, and that I hope we fix soon. So hopefully I cleared up that. That was one thing I definitely wanted to make sure I covered on today's session.
Yeah, we'll make sure the devs see this too.
All right, so let's move on and talk about how we can make this a little bit more streamlined. So right now we've been talking about modifying permission set. And so all of our settings are inside of this one monolithic user role, right? That's not something you have to do. So let's get out of here. Let's go back into our permission sets here. All of these roles that we see here can stack. And that means that you can have more than one role. Now, what happens in the event that your role conflicts with what another role says? In that event, you are going to, or Ninja is going to defer to whatever the most permissive permission is. So in the event that you have two roles and one role says you have no access to policies, and then another role says you have access to this specific policy, well, you have access to that specific policy. So whatever is more permissive, that is going to win out. So what we can do here is end up, whoops, wrong one, with a co-managed baseline. And so this right here is how you're able to set kind of a baseline role for what somebody in a co-managed situation can do. And so in my case, I've denied them access to system, I've denied them access to MDM connections, I've denied them access to organizations, and I have allowed them access to remote tools, remote access, and only Windows devices. They can view and update Windows devices down here at the very bottom. And then inside of policies, no access. They have the ability to only run scripts that are in the uncategorized category right there. And you can see I have no access right there. Oh, yeah, and I see Chris is following up on our conversation from earlier, all to no access and then change the one category. My thing is I still just don't see how you're able to change this so they can create scripts. So yeah, maybe we can have a discussion about that privately, Chris. So yeah, we've created our baseline permissions. And the benefit of this is what happens when you have 20 different co-managed organizations, 20 different on-site coordinators who you have to deal with. And you need to make that top-down change, something that's going to apply to everybody. Well, you don't want to have to go and make those changes to 20 different individual permission sets. And so right here, I've created a baseline of what you're able to do, but I need to finish that with a second role that grants access to the specific organization. And so in this case, I have the Herrera org access right here. And if I go into organizations, you can see the only org I have access to is Herrera Technologies. And now all my other permissions here, really nothing. Nothing in devices, nothing in policies. The only thing that really apply, policies, I did explicitly allow access to their designated policy here, the Herrera Technologies policy right there. But those are the only two menus here that I've made changes. Everything else should be disabled here. And now what I can do is I can stack those two roles on top of each other. So here, I am logged into an account that currently does not have any permissions. Exact same environment, but this does not have any permissions. And so you can see I can't do anything. I can't see any devices. I see myself. I don't see any contacts. I can see I have integrations here, but I can't actually do anything. Same thing with the library. I can download Ninja Desktop, but I can't do anything else. And so I need a role in order to have visibility and access into anything. So I will go into technicians. I will search for my fake account here, and then I'll go into roles and I will add in my baseline as well as my Herrera org access there. And I'll add in that role or both roles like that. And so now I have two. And when I go and refresh this screen here, it is going to ask me to log in again. And now I'm going to have permissions. Uh, and so here on the on the system dashboard, I can see Herrera Technologies and I can click into it, but I don't see any devices. So what's the deal here? Well, let's go back into our system administrator tab. And if we go and look at Herrera Technologies, we can see that this is all network devices, all NMS devices. So of course I can't see anything because I don't have the ability to see NMS devices. I only have the ability to see Windows devices. So let's go ahead and go back into my roles. Sorry, my technicians here, and let's modify this. And let's say, actually, you don't need the Herrera org access. You need Bill's Maple Leaf Diner access. And so we'll go ahead and save our changes there. Again, when I refresh, because I've made a change to my permission sets, I am going to have to re-log in. And this would apply, obviously, when I clicked on anything inside of the platform, because it would realize that my account no longer would have access to that particular setting or permission. And so now when I go in here, I see Bill's Maple Leaf Diner. And then here I actually see my devices and I can start taking actions on them. And so you can see I can pretty much do everything I want to this device because I have given myself update access. So if we go back into our permissions here, you'll see that we have devices. And so in here we have view and update access down at the very bottom. If you want to have any impact on a device, if you want to run a script on a device, you do have to have update access. View means exactly what it sounds like. You can view, but you can't do anything else. So even if you have the ability to run scripts right here, and you have explicitly allowed the ability to run scripts, unless that is also paired with device update access that we see here, you do not have the ability to run a script until you have both device view and update, as well as a run or more permission from the automation library. So very important thing there if you are looking to ensure that you have the ability to execute scripts on devices, which is very, very common. Now you can see I don't have the ability to access secure fields so that when I do go into my custom field tab here, I'll see that I have a secure field right there, but no ability to access it. I'm not able to reveal what is inside of the secure field. Now this type of permissions, this can be split out, more granularly if you'd like. For example, we could pull out devices as well. And so you're welcome, Doug. And so you can go ahead and say, well, I want to have a baseline permission setting for maybe remote tools and remote access, but then I'm going to also have an additional setting for maybe MDM devices. And so what I'll do here is I'll create a new permissions role here. And I'll say that this is a blank template. And I'll come down to devices and I'll turn this on. And I'll just go and say, well, you also have access to view my Apple iOS, iPadOS, and Android device types. And so I can say that this is MDM access, like so. Now note, I'm not giving them the ability to manage the connections. It's kind of the configuration of MDM still off limits to them. This is just about devices enrolled in MDM and having access to them if they're inside of the one organization, Bill's Maple Leaf Diner, that we currently have access to. And so I can save this and then assign that role to my devices, and I would then be able to see MDM devices in addition to my Windows devices. So that's kind of more of the MSP centric examples here, but there are, of course, a lot of valid use cases for when you need to let an outside vendor into your system if you're an internal IT system administrator. And I mentioned the example at the top of the call of my particular situation for this, which is that we had a shared HVAC system. And so, if there was an issue on the weekend, uh, nobody would want to pay for there to be emergency service. And so having a remote option was really beneficial. And so in that case, I had an end user uh, account created for the HVAC company. They were able to then log in and get a view very similar to this, and they were able to use NinjaOne Remote to dial into that specific device. And so in this case, using an end user account, even though this person wasn't an end user, they were, a technician really. But in order to safely limit the access to what they can do and see, I wanted them to use just remote access so that they can get in and fix their particular issues with the HVAC system. However, there are, of course, times when you may need to give technician level access to someone. I'm thinking of sometimes where you have outside vendors and they need to support the devices that you purchased from them. And again, it's a speed equation. Do you want to wait a couple of weeks for a RMA to get processed, and then you have somebody who can then come out and fix the issue? Or if something is able to be addressed remotely, are you able to give them remote access so that they can quickly solve the issue and there's a minimum of downtime and impact to business operation? I've mentioned many times that my endpoint management experience is from over a decade at a movie theater chain. And so we make money on the weekends. That's when you're printing money as a movie theater. And so there's also a corresponding higher cost for any sort of vendor to come out on the weekend. And so if you're able to reduce the downtime, get back up faster, while also reducing the cost of having to have somebody come out and fix a particular problem, that is ideal from a business outcome perspective. Now, the last thing that I have for today is a question that Jonathan had forwarded over to me about allowing API access, uh, but limiting that API access so that you only see certain devices and certain organizations. And that's absolutely possible. I did want to go ahead and cover that, how that would work. So, for starters, here we have our API, our client app IDs. I want to go ahead and create a new client app ID. You have a couple different options here. Now, if we used API services here and we used client credentials like this, uh, client credentials is going to have access to everything. So it is a system administrator level of permissions. So if you generate something with client credentials and you give those credentials to somebody, they're able to see everything. They have access to all of your API endpoints that support client credentials. They can see all that information. It is not going to be restricted by the customer or their particular login into Ninja, because client credentials is not tied to a login to Ninja. It is independent of that. So for this particular use case, I would recommend using the web option here and then using the authorization code grant type. And what this means is that your client ID and client secret are still required in order to request access into NinjaOne. However, there is a secondary layer there where you need to be logged into NinjaOne, which means you need to have passed an MFA check and you need to explicitly authorize the connection into NinjaOne. The secondary benefit of authorization code means that API call is then subject to the user permissions of the account that you are approving with. So even though you're creating a API client app ID here as a system administrator, because you're using the authorization code grant type, it is subject to the permissions of whatever user is initiating that API call. And I do have an example of that right here in VS Code. This is a script that is designed to pull a list of all organizations in a division, and it is going to retrieve all of that, tabulate up the workstations and servers in that environment. Now, if I was running this with client credentials, or if I was running this as a system administrator, this would show me all of my devices, right? But I am running this as a limited user, the same user who only has access to Bill's Maple Leaf Diner. And so when I run this script like this, Oops, I have to restart my PowerShell terminal. Live TV, ain't nothing like it.
I'll pop in and tap dance too. So yeah, thank you, Jeff, for calling in this question in particular. I saw this in Discord. So yeah, Kevin, you got great questions too. We definitely want to hit up that. Jeff, Kevin's asking, I know we want to not interrupt this part. We'll circle back around to your questions here, Kevin, but are there any good methods to audit permission sets across roles? You know, can we export that at all? And then he has a second question here. End users that have Ninja remote access is their lock on disconnect type per device type. And then Doug too. So anyway, good questions. Let's let Jeff finish up this part and then we'll dive right back into them. But I just wanted to let you guys know we do see those and we definitely want to hit as many as we can.
And you can see here, if you look in the terminal, I know this is a little small here. Can I make this bigger? No, I can't. There we go. So here you can see that I only retrieved information from Bill's Maple Leaf Diner. I didn't get any of the other organizations that were inside of that division. And so when we look here, this is me logged in as my limited account. I only see Bill's Maple Leaf Diner. The API call that I made here, I only see that with Bill's Maple Leaf Diner. So yes, you can absolutely make API calls to accomplish this. Just remember, it is subject to the permissions of whatever user who is directly authorizing the authorization code. And just in case anybody missed this, because I know Jonathan popped in, if I hit the play button there, it is going to come and pop up here and say, hey, this API credential is requesting the following permissions. And this is the account right here that is going to be used as the authorizer, the authorizing entity within NinjaOne. And so right here, I can authorize that. And so now I'll see that the script back in VS Code has completed, and I've retrieved my information. So this is considered to be an interactive API session. A human being has to be there to actually say, yes, I want to take this action. If you want to make this something that's more of a recurring action. You know, a lot of times you're taking a recurring action on the API. What you're going to want to do there is to use a refresh token. And so you still need to do the initial API setup interactively, but then all subsequent interactions there are going to use a refresh token so that it doesn't have to be interactive. I believe that'll work up to 30 days, and then you'll have to reauthorize. Or you can contact our support team and get a sliding refresh token, which means as long as you're automating every 2 weeks or you're making the API call every 2 weeks to get a new token, it should be able to last indefinitely without any human interactivity. Oh, and one other bit here. If you're curious about getting started with the API, the script that I used here was lightly modified from this repo, the Ninja 101 API collection here. I use the OAuth example using authorization code. If you want to use refresh tokens with authorization code, example there, just straight client credentials up at the top, and then a bunch of other things that you might find useful if you like the API and a little bit of PowerShell. With that, I think that's everything that I had prepared, Jonathan, but I know we got a couple questions here. If you wanted to maybe help me out.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry about before. I thought I was helping and I wasn't. That's not the first time, won't be the last.
Always need help vamping. Thank you.
Cool. Well, I know folks, can see it here on the screen and everything, but yeah, we should drop that URL in the chat. But yeah, okay. So thanks everybody. Great questions here. Let's go back to Kevin's first, Jeff. This is auditing permissions. So you got these set up across. Maybe you've had Ninja for a while. You want to find out what has been established out there. Let's get a list of this.
So yes, I don't believe that we have a really good way to do that today. So for example, if I look at my user roles here, there's no way, as far as I know, to go ahead and get this out at scale. And I don't think we have that in our API. One thing I will say is that in 9.0, we do add the API endpoints to actually be able to create technicians and create users and contacts, and do that all via the API to, so you can programmatically create your users if you're not using an IDP. But I don't believe that that is also allowing us to set the permissions there. So we can go check real quick. 9.0 is still relatively new, so I'm not certain if that's something that we have in here. But I have a workaround that you may be interested in if we don't find it in this section.
Yeah, and for those who are curious or interested, so 9.0 out in Canada as of yesterday, out in Australia, New Zealand, Oceania. It's due, I believe, out to EMEA, to Europe, in next week, next Wednesday. And then due to the, I think the following week after that. Anyway, there's schedules. I'll drop into the chat. There's also schedules you can find in our Discord. It starts making its way to US that last week of June. And I think we skip a week for the 4th of July, and hits the rest of North America, or the rest of the US customers, the Wednesday after the 4th of July week.
So what we're seeing here is that the API will return the role in question, but I think your point is more about how are you able to see the individual permissions within roles to kind of compare them. And so my idea here would be to look at DevTools. If you hit F12 on your browser and then go into your technician roles, you'll see right here in the network tab that I'm getting some information back. And I think when I click into each of these, you actually get some information here about what you're able to do. So this would be a little bit of extra work, but if you click into each of the roles and copy this JSON out, that starts to get you into a point where I would probably take an LLM and say, hey, combine all this into one big JSON and then give me a CSV output there. So not a clean experience here, but if you are looking to really evaluate this at scale, this is probably the route that I would go down.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say, well, thanks. I love you always got a hack for something, Jeff. You always got a workaround for it. But let us know. I mean, fill out future requests, talk to your AEM. We're definitely listening. So if that's an important ask for you guys, let us know. Okay, second question, Kevin. Let's stay with you. End users that have Ninja remote access, is there a lock on disconnect type per device type? It's currently all or none.
There is not. Yeah, there is not the ability to do that today. Makes total sense that we would offer that. I totally see the value there. But yeah, nothing today. You kind of hit it on the head there. You can do it all or nothing, or you can go ahead and do a per device override, I believe, under the device settings right here. And you can see the default player settings. I suppose you could also do this per organization. It's like system-wide, per organization, and then per device. But I don't think we can do this based off of device type. Yeah, ultimately being able to do this maybe with tags or something like that, that would be really cool. But yeah, nothing that we can do for that today.
Yeah, kind of curious with the use case there, Kevin, with the devices, why they need to be handled differently. Okay, Doug, going off topic, just somewhat. Do you know if there are any coming plans to automate device location?
So I'm not aware of anything imminent, and by imminent, I'll say like the next 6 months, that is going to involve moving devices dynamically between locations natively within the platform. Now you can do that through the API, as you mentioned. What I would say is the true kind of solution here is probably the generic installer. And so this is a feature that's in early access today. And so you can just contact your account manager and they can enable it for you. But basically what this does is it gives you all of these agent installers right here with a token. And so you're able to use a consistent link to a NinjaOne script and then pass a token so that it goes to the appropriate organization and location. So I think that's kind of our designed workflow there. And then if you need to move devices after the fact, you can, of course, do that via API. I know there's a bunch of examples in Discord of how to do that. So yeah, I think that's kind of the workflow that we would look at here. Is you can include your tokens inside of the script, and then depending on some attribute of the device, you say, well, okay, your reporting this location, or there's something locally on the device that we detect that equals this location. And so you would use this token and you would register inside of that organization and that location. So yeah, I can see the value there, but I think that our intended workflow right now is really moving forward going to be this. I think we're trying to have this be GA in 10.0. This is going to be kind of our new way forward for generating installers and doing that sort of easier, more streamlined mass deployment. Of course, you still have the old usual way of generating installers as well, if you prefer to stick with the old stuff.
Hey, Robert. Robert jumped in and pointed out, look at this. He built a script for the API submission to automatically move devices depending on specific conditions, move them between locations within an organization. What's MAPI, you ask? Well, we celebrated the month of May by having our streams that month dedicated to offering some API training, getting started to some more advanced tips. We had folks from NinjaOne, also some awesome NinjaOne stars, our power users sharing off some use cases, which is great. And we also had a contest going on, and we still have votes. I believe this is the last day. We may be taking some votes tomorrow as well. I'll confirm. But this is the last day to vote on some of those. And we've gotten some great submissions. So if you're in the Discord, hop on over to contest, the API challenge. You can vote. I'll drop a link into here too. And the winner, the leader right now is Spencer, who I know is in the chat. And if you stay in the lead, Spencer, you're going to get one of these. It actually turned up. I had to get it off of a sketchy eBay situation. But anyway, it actually showed up. I was expecting it to be a swish 2 or like a switch with like the number 2 written on it or something.
Swoosh 2.
But it's here. And so the winner of the API contest, if you go to that link and you vote, the winner's going to get that. And Spencer right now, it looks like it could be you. So
is it too late for me to enter?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like Hef Junter.
Hef Junter. That is my alter ego.
And then Robert's now farming for votes here too. Okay, so let's see. Let's make sure we got a couple minutes left here if that's cool with you, Jeff. So Chris and Kevin kind of followed up on their question about the by device type, being able to have the for remote being the automatic lockout, which makes sense. Okay, let's see. Any other questions here that I missed?
And just to follow up on Doug's question, he said basically instead of many installers, where you have like one for each location, the idea is that you have a single installer, and the behavior of that installer changes based off of the token you provide to it. So in our case here, you can see, once this loads, you can see here the token ID. This is the parameter that you would pass right there. So depending on what token ID, that is what dictates what organization and location the device ultimately ends up with. So that is kind of our recommended way moving forward. And then if you needed to do some sort of move to a different location, you would just manage that via the API using Robert's script.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Doug. Good question. Okay, so I think the last one I see in, let us know in the chat if there's any other questions. We got time for one or two more. Here we go. Here's one, not related to this necessarily, more just about 9.0. Custom fields have been changed. Will it be possible to change the rights per tab per role? For example, organizations that could only see certain custom fields. As you mentioned, as Jeff pointed out too, 9.0 is fairly new. Jeff, I'm not sure if you've had enough time to really dive in and look at some of these things. Does this question, you have any ideas here?
Oh, yeah. I'll say, unfortunately, it really doesn't change anything from that perspective in terms of being able to assign custom fields to specific organizations. Still, when you create an organization custom field, it is applicable to all the organizations that you have. Now, what does change is that for device level custom fields, and this has always been something that you've had the ability to do, you can assign those to specific device roles. So right here, we might create Windows 11 compatibility custom field so that we can check on Windows workstations if they're able to make the leap to Windows 11. not really relevant on servers, right? So when I go and create this, I've created under my Windows desktops and laptops here a specific tab for workstation data. Um, or sorry, I'm in the wrong. I think I'm in the wrong one. But if I go into my devices here uh, and my roles, you'll see that I have created my Windows Workstation Data tab, and that includes Windows 11 compatibility. If I've made the Windows 11 registry block, I'm not going to see that on servers because it's not relevant. It's not the right device role. It doesn't even have that tab there. It would have a server tab that would be completely different. So yeah, no ability to do that. Um, I think the way that you're looking to do it, I think it would all be based off of device roles. It would not be something where you can kind of single out certain organizations or certain locations to have that specific field. The nice thing about it is with 9.0 is you do get much greater organization here. So, hey, all of my Windows Workstation data tabs or custom fields go in here. All of my user management custom fields for who's a local user, who's a local admin, when are they logging in, what groups do they belong to. That's all in one tab. My system performance check, which is really long, takes up a lot of space. I've got that on a separate tab. I have all of my power settings here on a separate tab. For my Surface account, I have that on a dedicated tab, and that just creates a nice linear experience so people can find what they care about. You are able to, of course, manage, the priority of the tabs. So there is some benefit there in that you can kind of organize these and make it so that it's maybe a little bit more clear about what's relevant. But again, that's kind of broadly based. It's not a customizable per organization setting. So definitely let us know if that's kind of critical to how you're operating is the ability to kind of get rid of custom fields that aren't relevant to devices.
Thanks,
Yes,
Jeff.
Kevin, I strongly agree. So much easier.
Woohoo! Good to hear. Good to hear. Okay. Robert, let me know that I rudely skipped over his question. Wasn't trying to do that, Robert. Oh, wrong one. Sorry. Here we go. Also for end users, if you have it set that you can connect after a timeout, is there a way to skip this for end users accessing their own device, but leave it for enabled text? This is going back to remote.
Yeah, no. So not yet. We're absolutely aware of this, and this is something that is, I think, figuring heavily into kind of revamping the end user portal and assigned user functionality and how we tie users from an IDP to a device. So nothing yet, but we're absolutely aware that that's something that you guys need.
Yeah, and I will say, Greg Smith, the product manager for remote and the end user portal, has been teasing me with big things happening on the mobile app front too, actually. So yeah, big things to come more towards the end of the year, but yeah, some really cool stuff coming down.
I think that this would ultimately be a function of the NinjaOne Assist app. So if anybody hasn't had a chance to check that out, that is kind of the end user app of NinjaOne. We have the Technician app, and then we have NinjaOne Assist, which is largely used for MDM devices so that we can do remote access. But it's also something that would give end users the ability to access, I think, documentation is in there, so knowledge base articles, but then also the ability to do quick connect sessions. And I think long term, the plan is to allow the user to control more of things like device access and things like that via that end user app.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll have a whole nother session on co-managed with end users, basically. Great. Well, Jeff, thank you so much again for taking time, hopping on yet another stream, another webinar. Thank you everybody for joining us too. Great questions as always. Let us know too. One last thing. So we've got 9.0 coming out. What we did last time with 8 was we had a whole week long where we had the product managers come on and kind of dig a little bit deeper into their specific areas. We have, of course, a webinar that Jeff will be leading and going through the whole overview. But keep an eye out. It'll be probably mid-July, so after the 4th here in America, where we'll have a week-long deeper dive into each cool each area, ticketing, documentation, the RMM, MDM, backup, all these new things we're going to dive a little bit deeper into for 9.0. So you'll be able to make sure that you're aware of all the new capabilities there. So keep an eye out for that. We're going to be doing another backups and bandwidth at the end of this month. So keep an eye out for that. And then last call, if you have other questions, this topic is a great example. We see discussions going on in Discord, and it seems like, okay, yeah, people have these questions over and over again. Let's cover this. If you have any requests, hit us up. You can do that via here in YouTube in the comments. You can let us know what you'd like to see next. You can do that in Discord too. Tag me or Jeff. We would love to get your input on what you guys want to see us cover in additional future streams like this. But with that, thank you all again. Thank you, Jeff, and have a wonderful rest.